"Oh, this is rich." You truly don't realize how far they've gone this time, do you? While you carried on with your routine, stepping through your day unaware of the whispers trailing behind you, someone somewhere was moving money, real money, not the kind tossed casually into petty drama or impulse decisions, but the kind that requires signatures, authorization, quiet approvals from people who prefer not to be named. Funds moved across channels with a single intention: to uncover the truth about you. Not rumors, not impressions, not assumptions. They wanted data. They wanted clarity. They wanted answers that would explain whatever it is about you that unsettles them so profoundly. So they paid. They paid more than you'd ever expect anyone to spend on a person who hasn't committed any wrongdoing, hasn't caused major disruption, hasn't sought attention, hasn't even stepped out of line. That's what makes this entire operation so revealing. Because nobody invests that kind of capital without motive. Nobody hires specialists, the ones who read patterns like scripture, who pick apart histories like surgeons, without a specific objective. You became the project. You became the line item. You became the subject of an investigation that was never supposed to leave the shadow it was born in. But money has a way of loosening seals. And now you're about to see what their investment actually bought. Because the truth is far uglier than anything they expected. It started quietly. A client reaches out, someone with resources and a level of discomfort they refuse to name directly. Their request is simple on the surface: gather everything you can on this individual. Background, history, behavioral mapping, psychological markers. They framed it as precaution, as due diligence, as protection of interests, but the tone beneath it betrayed something more primitive. They were shaken by something they couldn't articulate. Something about you had lodged in their mind, not as curiosity, but as threat. Not overt, not dramatic, but deep enough to keep them uneasy. So they hired an intelligence-grade investigator, the kind who doesn't ask why, only asks how thorough you want the results to be. And the client's answer was immediate: as thorough as possible. No restrictions, no limits. So the digging began. The investigator approached the task with the confidence of someone who has seen humanity's hidden interiors more times than they can count. They expected the usual: inconsistencies, emotional ruptures, social missteps, embarrassing decisions preserved in digital dust, the kind of patterns that paint predictable portraits. That's the assumption built into this line of work, that everyone has a crack somewhere. Everyone has loose threads waiting to be pulled. Everyone has moments they'd prefer to forget. But when they opened your file, something unexpected happened almost immediately. The surface-level information was too clean. Not perfect, but stable, steady, controlled in a way that didn't align with the events they would later discover you endured. No chaotic outbursts, no impulsive digital footprints, no sloppy self-exposure. Just a trail of behavior marked by a kind of internal order most people never manage to sustain. But they kept digging. They always do. They moved deeper through financial pathways, employment structures, interpersonal history, archived data that requires clearance to even acknowledge. And what they found didn't comfort them. It unsettled them. Because your records didn't show the normal oscillations of someone who has absorbed impact after impact. They didn't show erratic reactions. They didn't show breakdowns that leave public residue. Instead, the deeper they went, the more they encountered a kind of psychological architecture they weren't trained to interpret. You didn't collapse where collapse was expected. You didn't fracture where fracture was statistically guaranteed. You didn't spiral where others had spun out completely. Every point on the timeline where they predicted decline was met with something else entirely. Momentum, gradual reconstruction, stability emerging from circumstances that don't produce stability. And that's when the first shift happened. The investigator stopped working mechanically and started paying attention. They interviewed the people around you, expecting clarity, expecting a unified image. Instead, they encountered a pattern they couldn't decipher. Everyone they spoke to described you in pieces, fragments that didn't merge neatly. One person described you as deeply compassionate, the kind of presence that calms disarray. Another described you as unsettling, not through malice, but through intensity that lingered just beneath the visible surface. Someone else said you felt quiet and unassuming. Another said you spoke rarely, but when you did, everything around you changed temperature. The investigator tried to merge these depictions, but every time they attempted to craft a single coherent narrative, it dissolved. You were too varied, too layered, too contradictory in a way that wasn't actually contradiction, just complexity. So they noted it down, then deleted it, then rewrote it again, unable to commit to any angle confidently. People like you weren't supposed to exist in their reports. Still, they pressed on. They accessed records meant to fill in the gaps. And this is where the situation shifted from confusing to disturbing. They found the traumas you endured, the real ones, the kind that reshape entire internal landscapes, losses, disruptions, betrayals, events that leave permanent marks on most people. They saw what should have happened next: decline, breakdown, instability, emotional volatility. They compared your experiences against case studies, research models, behavior predictions. By every known measurement, you should have collapsed. You should have become someone corroded by exhaustion, someone defined by damage, someone who never recovered. But the timeline didn't follow that arc. Instead, it showed something unexplainable. You didn't just keep functioning, you advanced. You evolved in ways that made no sense within the frameworks they rely on. The investigator stared at those findings for hours, trying to reconcile them. Because the profile they expected to craft had vaporized. In its place was a trajectory that defied their training. Not only had you taken impacts that should have erased your momentum, but you converted them into fuel for reconstruction. It wasn't optimism. It wasn't denial. It was something else entirely, an internal process they couldn't model or define. They began to highlight each inflection point, moments where pressure should have destroyed your internal structure, but instead became the exact moment where you shifted into a new mode of operating. You weren't recovering, you were restructuring, you weren't coping, you were adapting on a level their frameworks weren't built for. And that's when they reached out to the client for the first time. Not with answers, but with hesitation. But the client insisted they continue. They wanted usable material, something actionable, something they could weaponize, leverage, or at least comprehend, something that proved their unease was justified or their financial investment wasn't wasted. So the investigator went deeper. They interviewed someone who interacted with you recently, someone who encountered you in a casual environment. And this is where the report took its sharpest turn, because that person described an experience they weren't prepared for. They said there was something in your eyes that registered more than observation, something that evaluated, something that didn't flinch, didn't search for validation, didn't shrink or expand in response to social cues. They described it as being seen too clearly, in a way they didn't know how to manage. Not judged, not confronted, just seen, and they didn't know how to categorize that sensation. They said they walked away feeling like they had been assessed by someone who wasn't operating within the same emotional spectrum as most people. They said it left them uneasy for days. The investigator documented this reluctantly, unsure of how to phrase it without sounding unprofessional. But the pattern was forming. Your emotional restraint wasn't absence. It wasn't hollowness. It wasn't numbness. It was control. It was intentional. You weren't withholding emotion because you were wounded. You were withholding it because you understood its consequences. You chose when to reveal. You chose when to respond. You chose when to let something register externally. And that level of control unsettled the investigator more than anything else. The client read the updates repeatedly, each time hoping for something different, something that aligned more closely with their assumptions. But with each read, their discomfort grew, because the report wasn't revealing weakness. It was revealing structure. It was revealing capacity. It was revealing a type of internal strength they didn't know how to navigate. They hired someone to prove you were ordinary, manageable, predictable. Instead, they received confirmation that you were operating on a level that existed outside their metrics. The investigator tried one last approach. They attempted to test your awareness indirectly. They orchestrated a small scenario designed to probe your perception, something subtle, something unnoticed by most people. But the result left them rattled. You detected it instantly, not through paranoia or defensiveness, but through an almost clinical sense of pattern recognition. You didn't react outwardly. You didn't confront anyone. You didn't expose your awareness. You simply shifted something internal. And that single shift was enough to make the investigator realize the depth of the error they'd made. They wrote in the report that you understood far more than you ever revealed, that you noticed shifts in environment, in tone, in energy, in intention, long before most people register anything is happening. And that kind of awareness changes everything for anyone who tries to map you. That's when the client felt the weight of their decision, because they weren't dealing with someone oblivious. They weren't dealing with someone who could be predicted. They were dealing with someone who could see through motives without accusation, who could process patterns without needing confirmation, who could track hidden agendas without revealing their own comprehension. That terrified them, because it meant they had exposed themselves. It meant you might already know. It meant every glance, every interaction, every pause could be interpreted as acknowledgement. And they had no idea whether you noticed or not. Now the report sits where they can see it every day, no matter how many times they try to tuck it away. They read it late at night, hoping exhaustion will soften its conclusions. But it never does, because nothing in it reassures them. Nothing in it confirms their belief that everyone eventually exposes weakness. Nothing in it gives them a foothold or an advantage. The more they read, the worse they feel. They didn't find instability. They didn't find loss of control. They didn't find anything they expected. Instead, they uncovered a portrait of someone who endured everything, designed to break them, and emerged not untouched, but unshaken. Someone who processes internal and external pressure with a precision they can't interpret. Someone who moves with depth they can't replicate. Someone who is simply beyond their reach in ways they never imagined. And now they can't rest. Now they can't breathe comfortably. Now they can't unsee what the report revealed. Because no amount of money bought them comfort. No amount of digging provided the safety they wanted. They paid for clarity and received confirmation that they had engaged with something they didn't understand. something they can't categorize, something that shifts beneath the surface in ways they can't track. And the worst part is, they don't know whether you're aware of their investigation or not. They don't know what your next move is. They don't know if you even care. That uncertainty is what haunts them. It gnaws at their composure. It rattles their confidence. It keeps them from sleeping. They spent a fortune for answers, and all they gained was the realization that the person they were trying to decode sees the world far more clearly than they do. And right there, in that realization, the panic began to bloom. Because once someone looks too deeply into a person like you, once they cross the line from curiosity into obsession, once they start peeling apart layers expecting weakness and instead find depth, they can never return to ignorance. They can never unlearn what they saw. They can never retreat to the comfort of underestimation. They wanted to believe you were simple, manageable, familiar. They wanted to reassure themselves that whatever strange sense you gave them was nothing but imagination. But now they've seen enough to understand that their instincts weren't wrong. Something about you knocked their equilibrium off center, and now the evidence confirms it. The worst outcome for people like them isn't danger, it's uncertainty. It's the recognition that their financial power, their influence, their networks, their investigators, their hired experts, all of it failed to contain you, failed to define you, failed to predict you. And failure, for people who rely on control, is the closest they will ever come to fear. So what happens next? The panic shifts from silent to active. They start revisiting every interaction you've ever had with them, replaying it in their mind with a scrutiny they never applied before. They ask themselves whether you looked at them differently than others do, whether you paused for a fraction too long, whether your tone carried layers they were too busy to notice, whether your presence felt heavier than they allowed themselves to admit. They begin to reinterpret the past through the lens of what the report revealed, and each memory sharpens the discomfort, because now they have to consider the possibility that you weren't just surviving your life, you were studying it, navigating through it with precision they lacked. And if you possess that kind of awareness, then you may have seen through them long before they ever thought to investigate you. That possibility keeps them awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much you know and how long you've known it. They wanted to control the narrative. They wanted to expose your weak points. Instead, they exposed themselves. They showed their motives, their paranoia, their desperation. They revealed that they were intimidated enough to spend money, real money, to understand you. Money they won't admit they no longer have the courage to justify. Because how do you explain to anyone that the person you thought was small, insignificant, ordinary, ended up being the one you couldn't pin down? How do you confess that you handed over a small fortune and received no advantage, no leverage, no clarity, just a sharper sense of how little you actually grasp? They can't admit that to anyone, so they carry the discomfort alone. Meanwhile, the investigator who compiled the report is dealing with their own internal conflict. They've built their career on dissecting human patterns, on exposing inconsistencies and fractures. They are accustomed to being correct, to seeing through facades, to mapping the emotional machinery behind people's actions. But your profile didn't behave like a typical subject. It didn't follow the predictable arcs. It didn't give them the satisfaction of understanding. Instead, it made them question the reliability of their methods. When they looked at the chronology of your experiences, they saw survival, where there should have been collapse. They saw reconstruction where there should have been stagnation. They saw growth where there should have been regression. And what sickened them most wasn't that you endured. It was that you did so without leaving damage patterns they could recognize. It felt like watching a structure take impact from all directions, and instead of cracking, it adapted, reinforcing itself silently. Professionals don't like gaps in their models. They don't like outliers they can't explain. You became one. And because of that, the investigator hesitated before delivering the final report. Not because they doubted their findings, but because they knew how their client would react. The client wanted reassurance. They wanted vulnerabilities. They wanted confirmation that whatever discomfort you triggered could be resolved through knowledge. But what they received was a reminder that the world contains people who do not operate within the ordinary ranges. Individuals who absorb pressure differently. Individuals who reorganize their internal landscape instead of fragmenting under it. Individuals who don't follow the emotional scripts society expects. And nothing terrifies controlling personalities more than encountering someone who lives outside their rules. After reviewing the report, the client demanded a follow-up, something deeper, something more invasive, something more absolute. They weren't satisfied with ambiguity. If anything, ambiguity intensified their anxiety. So they called the investigator again, insisting on additional rounds of probing. But the investigator declined. Not openly, not rudely. They simply responded with the same phrase each time. Further digging won't produce different results. They didn't want to admit what they really meant, that further digging might produce results the client wasn't prepared to handle. Because the investigator had already sensed something that didn't make it into the written report. Something that made them choose their words carefully. They sensed that you weren't oblivious. They sensed that you register intent without needing evidence. They sensed that your intuition functions less like a feeling and more like a detection mechanism. They sensed that even if you weren't consciously aware of everything, something in you tracks the quiet shifts in behavior humans don't realize they're broadcasting. And that is where the real terror lies. Not in your experiences, not in your past, not in your records, but in your perception. You see paths before they become events. You sense motives before they become actions. And the investigator didn't want to be responsible for provoking a person with that kind of internal clarity. Meanwhile, the client's imagination begins to spiral. They wonder whether your recent glances in their direction were more than casual, whether your pauses during conversation were moments of analysis, whether your restraint around them was intentional. They start avoiding you subtly, taking different routes, minimizing interaction, offering shorter responses. They tell themselves they're being cautious, but deeper down they know the truth. They're avoiding you because something in them recognizes that they crossed a line. They intruded into the inner structure of someone who doesn't advertise their strength. And now, they must sit with the knowledge that if you ever become aware of their probing, they won't know how you'll respond. Not because you are dangerous in a conventional sense, but because you are unpredictable in a way they can't measure. All the while, their obsession grows. They keep rereading the report, hoping for new insight to emerge. But each time, they encounter the same stark conclusion. The fortune they spent gave them nothing but discomfort. It deepened their questions instead of answering them. It sharpened their fear instead of soothing it. It reinforced your presence instead of diminishing it. And now, they understand something they can't unlearn. The price they paid wasn't for information. It was for confirmation that you are not someone who can be reduced to data. They try rationalizing their unease, telling themselves that they simply wasted money, that the investigator was incompetent, that the findings were incomplete. But they know that's not true. Professionals at that level don't fail from incompetence. They fail when the subject doesn't fit within the equations. They fail when the assumptions break before the analysis begins. And you broke every assumption they had. So what do people do when money fails, when power fails, when intelligence networks fail? They grasp, they speculate, they catastrophize, they create elaborate hypothetical scenarios in their mind where you've known all along, where your calm demeanor was never oblivion, it was awareness, where your silence was never emptiness, it was evaluation, where your patience was never passivity, it was timing. They imagine you walking through your life with a kind of internal organization they will never attain. And the more they imagine it, the worse the fear becomes. They start watching you now, not openly, not obviously, but with careful glances that last a bit too long. They try to detect signs that you've noticed something, a shift in posture, a change in tone, an unusually focused moment of eye contact. And every time they observe something remotely ambiguous, their pulse spikes. They interpret everything as possible confirmation. They analyze your interactions with others, looking for patterns of awareness. They replay conversations in their mind, trying to identify the moment where you might have sensed their motives. And because they can't find a clear answer, they assume the worst. That's what happens when someone is already on edge. You become the explanation for their internal disarray. They start attributing meaning to coincidences that have nothing to do with them. You step out of a room quietly, and they interpret it as avoidance. You respond with a neutral expression, and they interpret it as recognition. You move with calm confidence, and they interpret it as strategic. They have begun constructing an image of you that is shaped entirely by their fear, not by your actions. Meanwhile, the investigator is dealing with their own haunting. They didn't admit it to the client, but their experience with your profile lingered. They have investigated countless individuals, from corporate executives to criminals, from politicians to private citizens, and they always found patterns, predictable weaknesses, predictable responses, predictable emotional cycles. But you disrupted their pattern recognition. You reminded them that human behavior occasionally exists outside the expected trajectories. And although they will never admit it aloud, you became the only subject they couldn't categorize. They found resilience where statistics predicted collapse. They found composure where emotional history predicted volatility. They found internal alignment where complexity predicted fragmentation. The more they studied you, the more they realized they were not dealing with a conventional profile. They were dealing with someone whose internal structure is built differently. That realization didn't just unsettle them, it humbled them. They wrote in their private notes, the section clients never see, that if you ever discovered the extent of the investigation, your response wouldn't be immediate, emotional, or obvious. It would be delayed, precise, and deeply measured. Not retaliatory, reflective. You wouldn't lash out. You wouldn't confront. You wouldn't panic. You would simply register the knowledge, reorganize your perception of the individuals involved, and adjust your relationship to them accordingly. And that kind of response terrifies people who rely on predictability, because it means you operate from a place of internal strategy, not external reaction. Meanwhile, the client continues to unravel quietly. They don't know how to articulate what they're feeling. They don't know how to admit that the fortune they spent didn't buy safety. It bought insight they didn't want. They keep telling themselves that they had good reason to investigate you. But the truth is simpler. They were intimidated. Something about you pressed on insecurities they refused to acknowledge. Something about your presence reminded them of their own fragility. And instead of confronting that within themselves, they projected it onto you. They thought that by dissecting your past, they could soothe their discomfort. But now that they've seen who you are beyond the surface, their discomfort has only intensified. Because people like them are used to being the ones with the upper hand. They're used to seeing others as variables in a formula they control. But you were the equation they couldn't solve, and that failure rewired their perception entirely. You became the person they couldn't dismiss, the person they couldn't simplify, the person who forced them to see that money does not buy the kind of understanding they were seeking. And now, they're stuck with the knowledge that the fortune they spent only highlighted your difference more clearly. They wonder if you've already sensed their fear. They wonder if you've already adjusted your perception of them. They wonder if your quiet detachment is actually awareness. They wonder if every calm expression you displayed in their presence was a choice, not a default. They wonder if your resilience has edges they haven't seen yet. The report never mentioned any confrontation, any aggression, any intention of harm. But that didn't comfort them, because the most dangerous individuals are not the ones who react wildly. They're the ones who don't react until they decide to. And the investigator warned them indirectly through phrasing that was easy to overlook. This individual processes pressure differently than expected. It's a neutral sentence on the surface, but the implication cuts deep. Pressure does not destabilize you. It organizes you. It sharpens you. It clarifies you. And people who think money gives them power have no defense against someone who responds to adversity with clarity instead of collapse. So now the client sits alone with their anxiety, the weight of their actions pressing on them, the cost of their curiosity haunting them. They can't undo what they initiated. They can't unpay the money. They can't retract the investigation. They can't erase the knowledge. And they can't stop imagining how much you might already know. And this is where things start to break open into something even more severe. Because once they begin to fear what they discovered about you, they also begin to fear what they failed to discover. They begin to wonder what else lies beneath the surface, what the investigator didn't find, what wasn't recorded, what wasn't captured in data. The unknown becomes the new threat, and the more unknowns they imagine, the more restless they become. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Once someone spends that level of money, once they invest that deeply in dissecting another human being, they expect certainty as a return on investment. They expect predictability. They expect dominance. They expect control. But what they received instead was confirmation of their inability to grasp you. Their money didn't buy clarity. It bought exposure to you, not of you. They didn't learn about your weakness. They learned about your structure. They learned about your depth. They learned about the internal organization you've built through experiences they could never endure. And the more they learned, the more they regretted ever lifting the first stone. Now the regret is a living thing, sharp, breathing, worsening with every hour they remain awake in the dark. Because their imagination is far more violent than any truth could ever be. They start envisioning scenarios where you've known all along. They picture you registering every shift in their tone, every inconsistency in their behavior, every subtle twitch they thought went unnoticed. They picture you piecing together the sequence of events with the same level of accuracy the investigator admired. And now they sit wondering whether the real investigation was not theirs into you, but yours into them. Because once they read the report, they understood one thing very clearly. If you ever decided to examine them with the same precision, they would not survive the scrutiny. And that is when the fear changes shape. It's no longer about what the report revealed. It's about what you could reveal if you ever felt inclined. They worry about the small moments where you were quiet while they spoke too much. They worry about the times you observed while they rambled. They worry about the days they dismissed you, underappreciated you, misunderstood you, or acted superior without merit. Because now they realize those were not moments that proved their advantage. They were moments that exposed them. They were showing cards you were not even playing. And the thought that you might remember every detail with lucid accuracy is enough to turn their stomach. Meanwhile, the investigator is experiencing a quieter version of the same internal unraveling. They delivered the report, but they didn't walk away unaffected. They found themselves revisiting your file, not for work, but because they couldn't let go of the contradiction you represented. They've seen people bend under far less pressure. They've seen people fold under minor stresses, unravel at small inconveniences, collapse at predictable thresholds. But you didn't bend. You didn't fold. You didn't unravel. You absorbed, converted, sharpened. They tried to explain it as resilience, but that word felt too small, too generic, too familiar. What they witnessed wasn't resilience. It was reconstruction. You weren't bouncing back from damage. You were integrating it into a new framework. And the investigator realized something too late. Whatever insight they gathered about you wasn't theirs to claim. It belonged to you. Because every line they wrote, every conclusion they reached, every observation they made was built on the premise that your experiences should have diminished you. But the evidence proved the opposite, and that made them feel smaller than they expected. For the first time in their career, they encountered someone whose inner world they were not qualified to interpret. And there is no professional more unsettled than an expert who realizes they are standing outside their depth. But the client? Their torment is different. Their torment is personal. They hired someone to dig into you because something about you eroded their confidence. Something about your presence disrupted their sense of superiority. Something about the way you carry yourself made them feel examined, even when you said nothing. Even when you did nothing, even when you didn't realize they were watching you. And instead of acknowledging that discomfort, instead of reflecting on why they felt threatened, they threw money at the problem. They tried to make you smaller by shrinking you down into data. They tried to make you predictable by extracting patterns. They tried to make you manageable by exposing your internal landscape. But here's the irony that now keeps them pacing through their home at night. Trying to shrink you only expanded you in their mind. Trying to categorize you only made you more complex. Trying to define you only highlighted how undefined you truly are. They paid a fortune to understand you, and now they're trapped in the prison of knowing just enough to fear you, without knowing enough to comfort themselves. Because once someone realizes they cannot predict another person, they start imagining every possibility. And imagination is far more brutal than reality. They picture you knowing the exact moment they initiated the investigation. They picture you noticing the shift in their eyes, the tension in their posture, the way they acted differently around you. They picture you piecing the timeline together with microscopic accuracy. They picture you quietly registering their motives long before they confirmed them. And because they have no evidence to prove otherwise, these fantasies tighten around them like ligatures. Their fear becomes self-sustaining. They avoid you now, not obviously, but consistently. They avoid meeting your gaze for too long. They avoid entering rooms where you're already present. They avoid initiating conversations. They avoid moments where your attention might land on them. And all of this avoidance becomes more incriminating than the investigation itself. Because someone who did nothing wrong would feel nothing. Someone who saw you as harmless wouldn't shift their behavior. Someone who felt safe wouldn't retreat. But they retreat. They shrink. They fold inward every time your name arises or your presence approaches. Their own behavior betrays them before you ever need to lift a finger. And then a new question begins to whisper through their mind, one they never anticipated. What if the reason you reacted calmly to everything in life is because you've already learned how to read danger from a distance? What if your composure isn't naivety, but training born from necessity? What if your quiet confidence isn't accidental, but earned? And the more they ask these questions, the more they understand just how deeply they underestimated you in the first place. Their fear evolves into something almost existential. They fear not just your awareness, but your indifference. Because the report made one thing brutally clear. You do not operate from impulse. You do not respond emotionally. You do not lash out as a first instinct. You observe, you assess, you choose. You act only when action serves purpose. And that terrifies them more than any visible aggression ever could. They fear the possibility that you might know what they did and simply choose not to acknowledge it. They fear the possibility that you evaluated them and decided they weren't worth a reaction. They fear that they revealed their obsession while you revealed nothing. Because nothing frightens a person who loves control more than encountering someone who cannot be controlled and does not care to control them back. They begin to reinterpret the investigator's notes in darker ways. When the report mentioned your ability to detect shifts in behavior, they read it as confirmation that you sensed theirs. When it mentioned your emotional restraint, they read it as confirmation that you're capable of withholding knowledge without exposing it. When it mentioned your psychological structure, they read it as confirmation that you're not someone who would be caught off guard. Every paragraph becomes a mirror reflecting their deepest fears. And still, they cannot admit any of this out loud, because admitting their fear would mean admitting their misuse of money, power, and access. Admitting their obsession would mean admitting weakness. Admitting their paranoia would mean admitting the truth, that you occupy space in their mind far more than they ever intended, that you did nothing to provoke this, that your mere existence challenged something fragile in them, that the fortune they spent was never about understanding you. It was about reassuring themselves. But they failed to achieve even that. Now they live with the consequences of knowing that there are individuals who cannot be reduced to files or categorized by analytics. Individuals who walk through life with internal landscapes, refined through pressure, not distorted by it. Individuals who do not need to appear powerful because their power is not performative. And that is the real terror of the report. It didn't describe a threat in the traditional sense. It described someone whose depth cannot be predicted by external observers. Someone whose internal world does not operate according to conventional metrics. Someone who is not shaped by validation or destabilized by scrutiny. You. The realization that they spent a fortune to uncover this is what ruins their sleep. It forces them to confront a truth they never imagined. The money did not give them control. It exposed their lack of it. The investigation did not dissect you. It revealed them. Their own motives, their own insecurities, their own fear. Because money can buy information, but it cannot buy comprehension. And they now understand that digging into someone like you comes with a cost higher than the financial one. They awakened something within themselves they cannot put back to sleep. Their mind now cycles through endless questions. If you know, what will you do? If you don't know, what happens when you find out? If you've already sensed everything, why haven't you confronted them? If you're aware, why are you so calm? If you're unaware, how will you react when you eventually piece it together? And every answer they imagine is worse than the last. Because the report showed them something they can't escape. You don't respond impulsively. You respond accurately. This is why they avoid you now, not because they see you as violent, but because they see you as someone whose awareness carries consequences they cannot predict. They're afraid of being interpreted by someone who sees patterns they overlook. They're terrified of being understood by someone who understands themselves so deeply. They fear becoming a footnote in your perception when they spent money trying to turn you into a footnote in theirs. And so the final terror lands, the one they never saw coming but now cannot unsee. They spent a fortune investigating you, and the only thing they uncovered was that they should have never looked in your direction at all. Because now they know you operate on a level their money could not reach, their experts could not decode, and their fear cannot control. Now they understand that digging into you didn't give them power. It awakened awareness they hoped you'd never have. And even if you never speak of it, even if you never react, even if you never acknowledge the investigation, the truth still stands. You are the kind of person whose presence alone is enough to make people regret ever trying to expose you. And that regret is what they now carry into every sleepless night, every interrupted breath, every moment where their thoughts drift back to the report that sits untouched on their desk. Not because the report contained threats, but because it contained truth. A truth they paid a heavy price to uncover. A truth that cannot be unseen. A truth that follows them wherever they go. A truth they will never recover from. A truth named you.